In my last video, I said this.
I did not enjoy batch painting these, and I made a ton of mistakes doing it.
Hello, I'm Ruben, this is Manasru, and today I'm going to be talking to you about batch painting. After my last video, I had a lot of time to think about batch painting a lot of miniatures at one time. Then a thought struck me. How do I resolve my issues? What if I paint multiple different types of miniatures at the same time? When I'm painting my army, a lot of the same techniques are going to be repeated and repeated through every instance of cloth, every gun, every weapon. What if I take different miniatures and do all of those steps across these different types and then move on to the next step? So the first facet of the video is, what if I gather up a bunch of minis and try and get them painted all at the same time? The second facet is, I want to finish painting my army, so I want to paint a lot of my minis anyway. I can't sit around not painting minis, but I do want to spend a little bit more time on each individual one than I did in the last video. So let's not go quite as intense as we did with that one. In my last video, I painted about 15 minis in 5 hours. In this one, we're going to be painting 17 neophytes, 6 acolytes, and 1 big kitbashed beastie. That's 24 miniatures in 10 hours. Wait, that's only 5 minutes better than the last time. Oh no.
So I slapped on my mask, got my boys ready on those overpriced Games Workshop priming handles, and headed outside. I even actually used red primer this time. Now, before you ask what I'm going to use this for on the tabletop, I honestly don't have any idea. I just wanted to make some sort of horrible Frankenstein creature for the cult. So the first step of my batch painting process was the most time consuming. I kind of just wanted to get it out of the way and then move on to more details. The first step was to wet blend a quick and simple red to orange fade across all the bits of cloth across every unit. The cloth is going to make up a bulk of the painting here, since it's covering almost all of the bodies of the neophytes and acolytes. Once I'd finished working across all the cloth, I ended up with something that looked a little bit like this. Next, I'm going to need to brighten that orange up to a full yellow, so we get the full transition from red to orange to yellow. This is going to be done with some layering rather than wet blending, as I'm not really concerned about, for the very bright highlight of the yellow, getting as smooth transitions as I was with the orange to red. All I'm looking for is the kind of effect that we'll get from a distance. The neophytes I'm running, by the way, are heavily kitbashed. They largely use the bodies of the Necromunda Corridor box with some bits and bobs from both the neophyte and the acolyte box. This is because the Corridor box kind of gives me that feeling of fanatical devotion and the hodgepodge ingenuity in both sort of the sculpts and their poses, a lot more than the neophyte does. The neophytes kind of just look like space miners, which is cool, but not really the aesthetic I'm looking for. As for the acolytes, they're made using the bodies of the Delacour gang. God, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I really feel like this gives them more of a regal, priestly vibe, acting as more of an aloof faction within the cult, as they're ones with kind of a greater connection to the cult's religion. At this point, I've been painting for about 4 hours, and in terms of time, I'm starting to get worried. Mostly because I'm going to be dedicating a lot of my painting time to this big boy. So I started cracking on over the next few hours and started base coating my skin tones, as well as adding some extra depth to my bases, being very careful not to fuck up any of the work I've already done. Which is easier said than done when your partner's in the background saying funny things like,
"I'm not a coward, I just like a good save point."
Once we're done with those couple hours and laying down some more base coats, I can really start to feel the aesthetic coming together of the models. I already feel like allowing myself the small amount of extra time and multiple different types of minis to work on at the same time has allowed me to get over my issues the last time I tried batch painting. It's been a lot of work for sure, but it's been a lot more enjoyable being able to jump from one model to another, especially seeing my progress across this large number of models. Once we get done adding in the chitin and the grey for the weapons and armour onto the models as well, I'm starting to get really happy with how my genestealer scheme is kind of playing out across these models. Even when I deviate away from it for my neophyte sergeant, for example. Yes, he's made out of a poxwalker. Who are you, the Chaos Police? At this point, it's a bit over 5.5 hours. I also had some time to lay down these sort of quick infection patterns around the chitin of my genestealer monstrosity, which I think came out super well here on the larger canvas. It's a lot easier to do these kind of horrible looking veins than on the smaller aberrants. My next step for these minis is to go through and apply a wash all over the mini's skin. First a layer of Reichland flesh shade, and then I touch in small amounts of Druchii violet around the backs of the heads and the areas where the chitin connects to the skin. I found using these two washes together gives you a very cheap and easy way of kind of transitioning skin tone from a normal tan color to what I'm looking for, which is this sort of paler, sickly skin tone. Once this dries, this is how that fade tends to look. When I was done with this, I had about 4 hours left. Feeling probably overconfident, I decided to do some very, 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 very quick and simple non-metallic metal, just picking out the highest points of contrast. You can see with this kind of quick approach, we don't end up with the most amazingly detailed or beautiful models in the world, but it's definitely something that's going to have table impact, which I'm starting to really enjoy looking at. Next, it's time to tackle some of the details that only exist on a few of the models, such as bandages or candles. I even figured I had enough time to do a bit of cheap brass non-metallic metal on the cult icons, which are these strange staff that some of the cult hold on to. After all these details, I was up to about 9 hours of work, meaning I only had 1 hour left. Apart from finishing off the bases, my neophytes were done, my acolytes were pretty much done, but yeah, my monstrosity still had a ways to go. At this point, I thought it would be better to just spend my last hour cleaning up some mistakes and wrapping up my bases, and overall I had a much better time than my last batch paint.
I feel like I'm going to have a hard time coming to a conclusion on this video, because I enjoyed painting this lot of miniatures way more than the last time. However, I don't think I can feel comfortable saying, hey, if you didn't enjoy painting 10 miniatures, try painting 20 instead. All I can tell you is it seems to be working for me. But hey, we have a big kitbashed monstrosity we need to finish painting, so let's get to it.
So at this point, I did a bit of cheap, easy dry brushing on the bases, painted their rim a crispy black, and then got my partner to crack out some tufts and help me apply them. She likes doing that, it's not unpaid labor. And they're definitely super messy, and there's lots of places that can be dramatically improved, but they look the part. They're a rabble of misshapen and mismatched devotees of the cult. Like, in complete contrast to my previous batch painting attempt, I'm super happy with how everything's coming out. Now, let's move on to finishing up our monstrosity. And now that I've dramatically failed to paint this boy within the time constraint I provided for myself, it means I have to knock the video title from 24 models down to 23, but it means I'm free of time constraints and can take that little bit of extra time to just paint him a bit better than the rest. I used some of that extra time to start doing some non-metallic metal across his armor, marking out kind of my main points of high contrast first, and then layering and blending them slowly together. Once it's done, it's cheap, it's not smooth, but I think it looks pretty darn good for less than an hour's work on my tabletop model. I also went ahead and did some work on his flame gauntlet, his leg, his backpack, and his belt. By the way, this model is actually Bone Ripper from the Thanquil and Bone Ripper kit from Age of Sigmar, and oh boy, it was some work getting rid of all the fur and smoothing out all of the skin across him. Oh, and I am in no way endorsed, but this rocket is actually a piece printed by Armorcast's Cinematic Effects, and I just thought it was a really cool piece and wanted to slap it on him. A lot of the rest of the model is made out of bits from my box, as well as some terrible green stuff sculpting. Anyway, I began filling in the ridges of my terrible green stuff work with purple. I've said this before, but please let me know if you know what these inner ridges are for. It's really starting to annoy me that these hyper-evolved organisms have these apparent openings in their otherwise powerful chitin. Next up, since I don't know if I'm actually going to use this model for anything, and it's just kind of a fun experiment, I recently got an airbrush, so I thought I'd give that a whirl. I'd only really done one test model before this, and I really didn't do great, especially with my precision. I think the effect it gave on the model isn't terrible. The glow on the ground could definitely be improved with a little bit of brushwork, but I think it's a good sign that I need to spend some more time learning how to use an airbrush before I try this again. Now, you may have been sitting here thinking, wait, but this model doesn't have a head. Well, that's because I wanted to keep that separate for a while so that I could paint the chest behind it without getting it in the way. But now, the time is right. Behold, the demon rabbit, unholy beast of the cult. I'm sorry, that's so stupid. Yeah, so I slapped a Tyranid head onto it. Let's see how that goes. That's kind of the fun with conversions, is you kind of just get to slap on different bits here and there, and then BAM! Completed demon bunny head. Once that was done, there was just a few more finishing touches here and there, and he was done. This took about 10 hours after I'd finished all the other models, so overall I ended up spending 10 hours on 23 models and then the same time again just on this one. Even though I can see the messiness and mistakes in places, I'm actually really happy with this. And even though I have no idea what I would use him for in the actual game, I adore how he turned out. Like, he's way too big to be a Scout Sentinel, but I guess maybe I could run him as a Hive Tyrant or something?
Anyway, let's get on to the montage of all of the completed models.
Thank you everybody for watching. I enjoyed painting this little batch of minis so much more than the last set, which was kind of the main goal here. I also feel like they took me around the same amount of time but ended up with more impact than my aberrants did, so that's another plus. I'm sure the production on these videos is going to keep getting better and better as I keep improving and keep making more of them. So if you're here for that journey along with me, please give me a subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you know what those little ridges inside of the Tyranid's armor is, inside of the chitin, please tell me because I need to know. And it's worrying me, and help! Then the next section. Beep beep boo, boop boop bee. Please give me a subscribe if you enjoyed. Give me a subscribe. What the fuck am I talking about?
Hit it. Punch it.